All right, we're going to take a look at 3 charts right now. And these are certainly not reflective of in-depth personal counseling. It's quick, it's public. It's just to give you an idea of how astrologers kind of off the cuff can talk about individual birth charts.
Well, it's reflective of the in-depth counseling that I do.
Well, your sessions aren't this long, though.
And by the way, Jeff and I both see clients on a regular basis, individually, private, and you can contact either one of us, either online.
Yeah, the best place to go is StarIQ, STARIQ.com. And in fact, probably around noon tomorrow, the video of tonight's presentation will be up. And it will be up on YouTube as well. So if you want to share the message, people can get it.
Okay. So the deal here is that if we choose your chart, let us know who you are, where you are. And our first one is Patricia.
And we'll tell you why you are.
Yeah, you tell us where you are, and we'll tell you why you are. That's right.
Hi, Patricia.
Hi, Patricia.
All right, so you were born in Molasses, Virginia? All right. All right. There are many different ways to attack or to start looking at a chart. Students of astrology usually learn methods, and then after you've been doing it for decades,
you forget them.
You forget the methods. So one of the things I want to talk about, Patricia, here's your sun. The sun is in Aquarius, which is in principle kind of cool and open and friendly. And yet, the sort of the coolness of Aquarius is warmed up quite a bit by a very close opposition to the sun of consciousness, by expansive Jupiter in Leo and Pluto, the mythological lord of the underworld, in Leo.
Yeah, Jupiter Leo together is always an interesting combination to me because Jupiter is deep and dark and mysterious. And
Pluto.
I'm sorry, thank you. Pluto is deep and dark and mysterious, and Jupiter is like uplifting and it's all going to be okay. And so somehow when Jupiter lines up with Pluto, often what happens is the material that is intense is made to be lighter and to be more uplifting, and the transformation is kind of like it's more optimistic and more positive.
Yeah, if Pluto is the descent into the underworld and Jupiter is the ascent into a higher level of knowledge, these two together sort of can represent extremes in belief systems. They can go to the total cynic, because Jupiter is beliefs, Pluto, the total cynic. No, it all sucks. It doesn't mean squat. Or, yes, I'm totally invested and I'm selling my hair so that I can afford to follow the guru. So there's this intensity here of belief. And I think one of the things about Aquarius, it's one of the 2 know-it-all signs of the zodiac. Aquarius and Sagittarius tend to be 2 of the know-it-alls. And Jupiter is a planet of knowledge, and it was rising or ascending. This is the east in your chart, Patricia. So being an Aquarius, smart-ass Aquarius, with a strong Jupiter and Pluto, you got to be right. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to demonstrate that to other people, but certainly for yourself, you have to be right.
Yeah, there's an interesting mix of stuff in this chart. I mean, we have the fire and the air, the Aquarius sun and the fiery Leo rising and Pluto Jupiter. In fact, we have Mars and Saturn and the North Node in Sagittarius. There's a lot of fiery energy here, but we have a moon at the 29th degree and the very last minute, 59.
Holy crap, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if your birth time is accurate, and I'm not doubting it, then you were born, it's like your soul said, now, otherwise I'm going to have to suffer being so much fire, an Aries moon on top of all this other stuff, that I won't have any friends. But there's a part of you, even with Venus moved on into Aries, also more fire, there's a part of you that actually has heart. that has
Don't act so surprised.
that actually is more in your feelings and even here like this. See, the juxtaposition is really sweet because the moon is at the very last degree of Pisces, and and Neptune, which is the planet related to Pisces, is at the very first degree of Scorpio, and these are watery energies. The Uranus also last degree of watery Cancer. It's like you were born at a time where almost like this month, but very different, everything was about to change, or everything was in the process of change.
Even Mercury at 29 Capricorn.
And look how close. I mean, this is like the Mercury opposition to Uranus and square to Neptune are all within a degree of each other, and yet Neptune is in a different. It's in a different sign. It's at the beginning of the next sign. We call this, an out of modality square.
Right.
It's kind of your chart's weird, is what we're saying.
Yeah, but the thing is that you're really good at hiding it. See, the ascendant is what we usually see of a person. And your ascendant is Leo. Hi, how are you? More confident looking. But it's in the middle of Leo. So there's sort of this look of stability and reliability, and yet you're mentally restless. Mercury, the planet of intellect, is opposite electrifying Uranus. You're emotionally restless. You have the moon at the last possible piece of Pisces. So I think there's a heck of a lot more sensitivity. And yet what's so complex, these are two feminine planets, the moon and Venus. And the moon, as Rick pointed out, is not only in Pisces, but at the very end of it, you can't be more sensitive than having moon in Pisces. But you have Venus, the planet of love in Aries, and you could barely be less sensitive than having Venus in Aries. So it's really interesting, this swing between romanticism and sentimentality and vulnerability and independence, I think, is kind of a pretty persistent theme. Does that make sense? Okay.
Absolutely.
But it won't in a minute. That's how we'll check. I'll ask you again, and you'll say, no, that's wrong. Then we'll know we're on.
I think one of the things that's important that's going on for you, and we talked about Jupiter in the sky moving from Cancer into Leo, which means that over the next few weeks, Jupiter is going to come over your Uranus, opposite your Mercury, and squaring around the 20th or the 18th, whatever that date was, when Jupiter moves into Leo, it's going to square your Neptune. And I think that in some ways this represents an opportunity for you. But the opportunity comes from, I think there's a part of you that can answer questions before they're asked. Your mind is much faster. It races in some ways more than people realize. And it's good news, bad news. The good news is you can learn things quickly. The bad news is you can learn them so quickly that you learn the wrong things. I mean, that because you're ahead of the curve. I mean, it's a smart chart.
Yeah, and if with expansive Jupiter hitting, Uranus is the planet of freedom, but it's in the prison house, the 12th house. So there's a jailbreak coming up for you this month. That impulse, whether you actually act upon it now or you wait 6 months till Jupiter passes your ascendant, there's still the sense that the routine that you're in, which bores the crap out of you, you probably are going to have the last straw or reach some sort of breakthrough or breakaway point later this month.
And actually, Jeff, when we were talking about the new moon, we're really talking here, the new moon is at 2 or 3 degrees of Leo, but there are planets at that point in time. Mercury is back here. So the moon and the sun and Mercury are all coming across this point, while Mars, moving from Libra into Scorpio, is coming across here. So this axis for you, which I think defines some of the points in your life where there is change, maybe even just a new idea, a new way of looking at things, I think is ready. It's like you're ripe. And I think that this month is going to be an important month for ideological breakthrough.
Yeah, and I encourage you to chase the dream. Jupiter's going to form a harmonious trine with your Venus in Aries, interested in other cultures, people in faraway places.
And the moon.
Yeah, and the moon. So,
yeah.
allowing,
And
whether
Saturn.
whether you act upon it or not, expanding the framework of possibilities makes great sense.
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you, Patricia. All right. All right. Now we have Taylor.
Taylor.
All right, Taylor.
No.
No. Except no. It
No,
won't.
well, we'll redo it anyhow because it's that easy, but no. It's,
The fastest moving thing in the chart are the houses, because the houses are based upon the Earth's rotation on its axis. So it does a 360 every day.
9:54.
Houses move 1 degree every 4 minutes. But the next fastest thing is the moon, which takes 2 hours to move 1 degree. So what's interesting, Taylor's ascendant horizon point is 28.5 Libra. If you were born 6 minutes later, you'd be Scorpio rising. The ascendant is one's persona, one's mask. It's what we see on the surface, because it's where the spinning Earth is meeting the horizon, where it's emerging in the east. So it's kind of where we emerge on the Earth plane. And a Libra rising is charming, gracious, pacifying, peacemaking, but it's just a slim degree and a half of Libra. Under that is a hell of a lot of Scorpio. So what that is suggesting is, and I haven't taken anything else in your chart into consideration, is that if people take you at first blush as being this easy to get along with, an adaptable person, they are missing seeing the picture of toughness, which is very strongly reinforced there. And I don't mean you're not sensitive, but Mars, the warrior planet, Scorpio's key ruling planet, is exactly joined with Saturn, the planet of hard, cold reality. This is hammer and tongs. This is like, God, when you put your teeth into something, you're going to rip it apart.
ouch.
What depends,
Well, it's we look at charts and we see different things.
Right.
I mean, one of the first things that I saw was the moon in Aries harmonizing or trining with Jupiter in Leo. And this is optimistic and expansive, and there's a sense of openness, of positive energy with that is willing to say yes, willing to engage, willing to do something. However, I look at that Saturn Mars that Jeff just described in one way, and I look at this as Mars, which is at home in Aries as well as in Scorpio. Mars in Aries it's the gas pedal. It's how you go forward. It's how you assert yourself. It's how you aggress. And the moon is in Aries, so Taylor feels like responding like an Aries. If something happens, that first flush, that first response is right there, except as Mars is Trungpa Chogyam Rinpoche calls it first shot, best shot. It's that whoosh, except Saturn is the brake. And in your chart, the gas pedal, Mars, and the brake, Saturn, are inseparable. And so it's like as you go forward, something holds you back. It's the pushing on the gas and the brake going on at the same time, or hitting the brake and the gas pedal going down. And so there's sometimes this kind of herky-jerky, do it, don't do it, go, don't go, yes, no, should I, shouldn't I should have, I didn't, I won't, I should. And that energy then becomes, I think, part of this moon in Aries, that there's so much positivity that you've learned over the years that you can't always express it, because when you do, it comes back and gets you into trouble.
I think what that Mars-Saturn means is you have to be expert at whatever it is you do. Mars is doing, Saturn is expertise. And Saturn is mastery. So there is that sense that when you're prepared, and here's a paradox, it's in Aries, a pioneering sign. So you may be really good at committing to learning and mastering that new skill. until once you've got it mastered, and then it's not that interesting anymore. And then you got to go chew on something else again. So when Rick talked about the big open visionary part, Moon trine Jupiter, Sun in Pisces in the 5th, these are wonderful, joyous things, but you're willing to do the work to get there, is what I think, to have the grand experience. And Uranus just passed over your Mars-Saturn in the past year.
Yeah, and that's still, I mean, it's still there messing with it because it still has to come up to the moon in a couple of years. But I think that with that Uranus-Pluto square that we talked about earlier, that we've been talking about for years, Uranus, in its once every 84-year move through Aries, has been, as Jeff said, lined up with and maybe cracked open some of the places in your life where you've been restrained. There's a sense of freeing, maybe even where you didn't want to be free, so to speak. But Uranus, the lightning, has hit there. And also, Pluto from Capricorn is squaring that point. And so there's a sense of that whole Aries energy and how you manage the edge of your life, the place where you're willing to pioneer into what's new. That has been undergoing both rapid stimulation and upheaval as you're trying to figure out how you put that into place in the work, whatever that is.
Right, work, because Mars and Saturn have to do with work, and this is the sixth house, which is a house of work, so it's breakdowns or breakthroughs in work over the past year or so, which can mean the old skills are no longer interesting, or the situation might have gotten too repressive, and hopefully you've had some new places, whether it's work, whether it's hobby, whether it's self-improvement, but a passion for doing something new would make a good deal of sense.
Right, and also we've had Saturn, excuse me, in Scorpio making a 90-degree angle with Venus and Mercury, so maybe putting some pressure to make decisions, some criticalness around how you communicate, what you don't communicate, and in relationship to perhaps even relationship or love, because Venus is there, Saturn in some way holding it back. But there's one other thing I just want to touch on, and that is this moon is rather extraordinary because it's part of what we call a yod or a yud, the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the finger of God. And it's not this finger, just to be perfectly clear. And this is often a formation in a chart that has to do with how we turn irritation into a skill. And I think here, because it's the moon in Aries, there's something about how you are good in crisis, in the moment. That Aries moon can respond in the moment, and yet you have this ability or maybe the requirement of learning how to hold that back. And in some way, doing that dance around that moon, I think, is really important.
Yeah, it's sort of like I would really trust you in a crisis more than I would in a boring routine way.
Yeah.
And I encourage you, based upon particularly the north node of the moon, a point of growth or integration in Aries, get bored easily. Keep pushing. That's not a failure, even though it may have created some issues in life. Shutting up and accommodating yourself doesn't teach you nearly as much as saying, I got to head off in a new direction. Thank you, Taylor. All right, so now we have the birthday boy.
Happy birthday to
there's Kevin.
We did, but now...
We did that again. But now we're pulling up his criminal record as well. Okay? Well...
His mother's here, so you can give her give her your condolences.
And I think she was well medicated or spiritualized at the time, because Kevin has the moon, which is mother, and often the birth process in Scorpio, but conjoined with Neptune, the planet of faith, fogginess, or pharmaceuticals. So,
or music. And we know that Kevin certainly is a performer, does music, and with the moon Neptune, there's that. What it really is, Neptune is the planet that dissolves the hard edges of Saturn. And so when the moon is lined up with Neptune, here's someone who feels engaged. The moon is the matrix, feels connected when the field is melting the boundaries, which is what music does. And I would imagine with the Moon-Neptune conjunction, one of the attractions to music is the fact that you can get out of your hard-ass self and kind of flow and let those boundaries kind of melt a bit, because that's what happens when the music occurs.
Yeah.
Now, granted, that's in square to Saturn, and this is the problem.
Well,
a problem.
Well, the problem is feeling more responsible for other people and other things than perhaps is beneficial to you. The reason I say that is Saturn is a planet of responsibility. It's making a right angle to the moon in Scorpio. I have the moon in Scorpio too. Traditional astrology considered it a horrible place for the moon.
So do people that know people with...
Now I'll show him the finger of God. I think he's ready for it. But there's a very interesting paradox here, Kevin, in that here's Neptune, the planet of forgiveness or fogginess next to the moon, and here's Saturn, the planet of guilt or responsibility, in a challenging right angle to the moon. But here's what tells the tale for me, and that is this point: the south node of the moon, the dragon's tail, your karmic backside, the place where you can only fall back and can't move forward. Yours is in Capricorn, a sign of responsibility and restraint, in the 8th house of other people's needs and other people's values, which is like holding it together for other people. And yet your north node, a point of growth or integration, and your sun, which is also a place of growth, are in Cancer. And this is subjective and it's personal, and they're in the 1st and 2nd houses, which belong to you. In other words, I think in some ways it's healthier for you, having made an obligation to someone, to say, I don't want to get out of bed this morning, and I'd really rather stay home. And although that might be embarrassing or inconveniencing, there's something in that imagery, Kevin, which is, I think, nourishing and healthy for you.
I actually agree with you in theory, but I don't see that happening, and I'll tell you why. I don't see that happening because Saturn is in a trine with Venus, which basically says, once I make a commitment, if I love my job, if I love my mother or my partner or my kids or my parents or whatever, I am going to do whatever I need to do to fulfill the responsibility or the obligation.
And that's different as being a responsible person in a general sense, as opposed to having to respond to everything everybody else puts up.
Well, yeah, good point. And yet when he doesn't respond, there's no arguing, because Pluto, which is close to Mars when he was born, which is feisty and intense in itself, but Pluto is very closely sextile with the Sun. And that is when Kevin finally says, "This is how I feel." That's it. That's the end of the discussion. I mean, I'm not saying that there is never any discussion after that. I'm just saying that there is a sense of power and intensity and inarguable reality to those feelings, which may not express all that easily, with Saturn so strong to Venus and Mercury, the communicator, and Pluto so strong to the Sun.
So what does the year ahead look like for Kevin?
I see him owning a small business.
I do. And perhaps doing more dramatic events as expansive Jupiter enters the 3rd house, the community, collaboration with community activities with other groups, organizations, in a celebratory way might be advantageous, as Jupiter, the planet of expansion, is in celebratory Leo and will be entering your 3rd house of near environment.
And Uranus will be conjuncting his Jupiter in Aries. So that's actually
the 11th, that's also community.
Yep. That's certainly expansive. I think the fact that Pluto is already past the opposition to your Sun, that in some ways says that the past couple of years have been a real turnaround and an intensification and a deepening of processes that involve relationships. It could be your relationship with friends and with loved ones, with family, but also in relationship to job. There's some power, struggle or power stuff going on as Pluto opposed. This is history, and in a way it's like you're already through the eye of the needle. I think that whatever the craziness of last year or the year before is now kind of settling back down, is my hit on this.
Yeah, and I want to say something else about the birth chart. There's a lot of communication skills and intelligence, and yet it's interesting that you can rationalize or intellectualize a lot of things to make them work. But I really love it when you go, yes, this is what's logical, and this is what other people are going to want to hear, but they don't quite match my feelings. And giving those feelings an equal, albeit inarticulate voice, a place I think is a healthy thing as well. So have a happy birthday, Kevin, and thank you for the venue.
And more than a happy birthday, have a happy entire next journey around the sun.
Yeah. And you all have a happy, wonderful July and the rest of the summer. Thank you, Rick, for your work tonight. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you,
Aaron and Makia and Tyler, and who did I miss?
All right. So be generous with yourselves, particularly starting in the second half of this month.
Right. And then be generous with other people.
Oh, that'll come.
Whatever. Thank you all, and see you next month. And remember, this will be up live on Star IQ, STARIQ, stariq.com, or Jeff's Facebook page or my Facebook page, probably sometime early tomorrow. And you can share the recording of the first part of this with your friends and people that you want to torture. Thank you.